The investigation into the Long Island serial killer began as a search for a missing woman named Shannon Gilbert. Instead of finding Shannon, law enforcement came across body after body after body on a strip of beach in Long Island. It began with the Gilgo 4, then more victims, eventually totaling 10 until Shannon's remains were finally found. Tonight, we return to the scene where those bodies were discovered 13 years ago.
In December of 2010, authorities make a grim and gruesome discovery along the sandy shore here near Gilgo Beach. The bodies of 4 women badly decomposed and wrapped in burlap. Megan Waterman, Melissa Barthelemy, Amber Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes, known as the Gilgo 4.
Then we'll bring in our experts to look at 2 significant questions in this case which have not been answered. Where were these victims murdered? And are any of the other 7 victims connected to the Gilgo 4? Tonight, we are live from Long Island as we continue to investigate the Long Island serial killer.
I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight in our continuing coverage of the Long Island serial killer case. And, you know, we're learning stuff, right? We're finding out more, but there are still so many questions connected to this investigation, to this case, and to what happened on that stretch of beach in Long Island. And these are questions that may or may not be answered. Now, if in fact the accused killer is the one who did it, he's got all the answers, all of the answers. But if he doesn't speak, or if he's not the Long Island killer, or there is more than one, or there are 3 or 4, whatever the situation is, we may not get those answers. We may learn a lot more in a trial than has been made public already, although it seems some of the most significant parts of the investigation have been revealed in how they tracked this man down, the witness, the pizza crust, the DNA, the hair, the burlap bags, the burner phones. All of that information has, in fact, become public during the course of what the DA has spoken about. Well, we also know, where the bodies were found, obviously. We know where that took place, and that stretch of beach. And that was the part of this case out there in Gilgo. That's really what started it all, right? There's a search for a missing woman, and then a body's found, another body's found, and then they say, wait, we're on to something here. Then they bring in the reinforcements and start discovering a whole bunch of bodies. And you're wondering, how could there just be bodies strewn about a beach? Like, how does that happen? I mean, don't people go to the beach in the summertime? No one saw them. When were they placed there? So we know where they were found, but when were they put there? When? How long were those bodies found in the marshes and the beach in that area? Then you got to think about evidence. Where are you getting the evidence from? Is there evidence inside the accused killer's house? How significant was that search? Because, you do the timing of all this, right? You're going back 13 years. So were there relics? Was there any sort of potential DNA evidence? Is there anything that links any of these victims to the house? Is there anything in the house that links to one of the victims? Anything. Was there anything in the backyard, in the basement? And not all of that is really clear right now. They've been much more vague about that. Now the charges are in, you're not going to hear much more until we get to hearings inside the courtroom, motions that are made, objections, motions to suppress, all of that, it'll come out. And at the trial, you hear everything, but what do they know? And to me, the biggest question in all that has not been answered is, where were they killed? Right? We talk about Gilgo Beach as like the scene of the crime. Well, it's a scene of part of the crime, but I don't know. Do we think that they were murdered there? Probably not. Probably not. Murdered somewhere else. Were they all murdered in the same place? Were they murdered in different places? How were they murdered? Like, that part is a big question that has yet to be answered. And like I said at the top, there's one person who does, at least one person who knows the answer, and that would be the killer. And if it's the man who's accused of all this, well, then it's him. But will investigators be able to put those pieces together? So we don't know where they were killed, but we know where they were found. So today, Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson, he's been covering this story. He's been at the courthouse. He's been in the neighborhood where the house is. And today, he was at the scenes of where all these bodies were found. Let's take a look.
Off Ocean Parkway here in Long Island, off the sandy shore, this is where a gruesome discovery took place. Off the water here, 4 victims were discovered, wrapped in burlap, badly decomposed. Megan Waterman, Melissa Barthelemy, Amber Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes, known as the Gilgo 4 because of the proximity to Gilgo Beach. Now, to show you we're in relation to where the next body was found, to the Gilgo 4, we have to get behind the wheel. We're still on Ocean Parkway. We're going to drive down this stretch of road along the water here and the beach. And it's in around, I would say about a quarter of a mile. Around this area is where the body of an Asian man was located, still unidentified, dressed in women's clothing. Now, about a mile from where the Gilgo 4 were located, still along Ocean Parkway here, this stretch of beach is where the body of Jessica Taylor was discovered. Still along the same stretch of roadway, about a year later and 5 miles from the Gilgo 4 were located, along here, Jones Beach area, the remains of 2 others are found, a toddler yet to be identified, and the remains of Valerie Mack.
And Matt Johnson joining us live tonight from Gilgo Beach. Matt, great to see you. Okay, I want to dig a little deeper into this tour that you just took us on of the area. And the first thing that strikes me is this is a highway. This is a park. I mean, there are cars going by. I understand it's summertime, more people heading towards the beach areas, but this is a busy, well-traveled road. Question, in order to deposit a body in this area, you would pull over like you did and you'd be in sight of cars driving past you, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, Vinny, good evening to you, and that was what was on our minds today. We noticed a few things, that it was very busy stretch of roadway, but 13 years ago, I was on the other side of the road where these bodies were found. So 13 years ago, there were no bike path, and there would have been fewer pedestrians and fewer people. There is also no street lights, completely black, pitch black in this area. Very different than this stretch of beach where I'm at right now, Gilgo Beach. Further down, about a 5-10 minute drive is where those victims' bodies were found, again in burlap, badly decomposed. And it's a very eerie, ominous place to be. It's very overgrown, it's marshy, there's reeds out in the water there, and it's just, you don't expect you would see anybody there, and you don't expect that anything would be found there if you were to look.
So here's what I'm trying to piece together, right? If you're going to do this in the middle of the night, no lights, right? You're going to need a flashlight.
Right.
I mean, you're going to need light to see where you're actually going, because you're walking through what? Overgrown marshes?
And that's exactly why a lot of people suspect that maybe the killer used a boat or maybe a different way of transportation. But everything is very close when you're talking about the prime suspect, the person that prosecutors say is behind these 3 deaths of the Gilgo 4 and the suspect in the 4th, because I want to put a map up on your screen right there, and we can show the relation to where Rex Heuermann's home there in Massapequa is located across the waterway from this beach and this remote area, this stretch near the highway where these 4 bodies were found. If you keep driving a little bit, not too far from there, that's Amityville, and that's where the storage unit that Rex Heuermann rented was searched by police. Short drive from there, that's the causeway. It takes you over a bridge and then over to Ocean, the highway here, where off that is where these 4 victims that we're focusing on here was located. So it's all relatively very close, Vinny. Middle of the night, there's no lights, there's no street lights. Back 13 years ago, 10 years ago, you were able to pull off right near where these bodies were located.
Okay, so you can pull off close there. If you pulled off in that area, would you be seen by anyone who would be driving down the road? And I understand in the winter, you're not going to have as many people in the beach area, right? And in the middle of the night, you're not going to have as many people. But when, you know, troopers and other folks are just driving down the road and you see someone pulled over in the middle of the night, you're going to stop. It seems pretty risky. Would it be risky? Would you be spotted where you'd have to park in order to get off the road and get to where you're depositing these bodies?
I think that it is risky because, again, remember, police took into custody and they're searching through his truck. It was a larger truck that Rex Heuermann had. If you assume that he used that, if he is, in fact, the killer and deposited these bodies over there. But you would think that someone would see something, but in the middle of the night, in winter, you might not see anything. There is no lights out here. It's
right.
very remote.
But you're gonna have to illuminate the area so you can see where you're going and what you're doing. So either your car lights are gonna be on, or you're gonna need a flashlight. You're gonna need something in order to do this whole thing. And I understand you could do it and no one would come by, which is obviously, I guess, what happened here. But it just seems risky because it's not just one body. It's not just 2, it's like 3, it's 4, potential of 11 bodies that could have been discarded in that area. Okay, so you're in Gilgo tonight. What are folks saying out there? What are the people of Gilgo Beach? Because it looks like Gilgo Beach is like a regular beach, right? In the summertime, it's a place where people go to hang at the beach, go in the water.
Right, you know, everybody's having a good time. They're bringing their families out here. It's kind of a locals place. I'm facing the sign that faces the actual Gilgo Beach, where it faces the Atlantic. It's very sandy. It's great. There are people out there, you know, doing bonfires right now, drinking some wine as the sun set. Earlier today, it was a lot of, you know, people playing volleyball and having a good time. But again, this is about 5 minutes, 10 minutes away from where these bodies were located, in a very different area where it's all marshy, overgrown, and just kind of an uncomfortable place to be, especially with all the bugs. But today, you know, everyone really talking about the case. This has haunted this community for more than 10 years. Most people telling us that they never thought that they would see an arrest in the case. A lot of people still wondering if there's going to be another arrest. Maybe someone else, maybe there's multiple serial killers, because you have some of the bodies found with Gilgo 4 that were in the burlap and they were also bound. And then you have some of other bodies in the 11 found in this area that were dismembered. But we were talking about it with locals today. Take a listen.
It's horrifying, actually. I just been coming here for years. I was here during those times. Very scary, very scary.
Why was it so scary? You know, there was bodies being discovered. Were you in fear that they wouldn't make any arrests, that these would go unsolved? What was...
Unsolved. That, you know, for years and years and years, I never heard anything else about it. And somebody was out there doing all these horrible things. Because I'm shaking right now, like...
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's great that they apprehended the guy. I mean, I'm sure people that live around here full time, you know, makes them feel a little bit easier knowing that the guy's off the streets and stuff like that.
Did you hear that? That lady said that she was shaking, not because she was on camera afraid to talk to us, but just because, like, just the fear over this case in this community over the decade when they didn't really have any answers. And they say that they're still searching for answers, Vinny. They still don't know if there's another killer or an accomplice out there. Again, I went over the differences in some of those remains that were found and some of the victims in this area. They're also wondering, you know, they're thinking about the victims' families and how they're holding up. And then we have all of the victims that haven't been identified in this area.
So let's get away from the Gilgo 4 for a second and get to those other bodies, right? Because the Gilgo 4 are wrapped in burlap and handled one particular way. But with the other bodies, are they found in an area, like, why didn't people discover them? Are they also in like marshlands? Are they actually on the beach? Are they in an area where no one would have been walking? Because some of those bodies were there for years.
Right, some of them were legs that were discovered over at Fire Island. You had another area where just a head, a skull was discovered. Other remains were skeletal. So I think that we're dealing with a situation of, you know, with the waterways, was some of the remains moved? Perhaps maybe with the water or over time, some of the remains were the sand was taken off, removed that way, just by the elements, or maybe animals moved some of the remains, some of the victims' remains. I think that, you know, we have a lot of scenarios that some experts and anthropologists are going over right now, and that's pretty important as well, because in this massive treasure trove of mountain of evidence the prosecutors in Discovery passed over yesterday to defense attorneys, it's sensitive photos of the crime scene that was handed over, along with anthropological findings, those reports and autopsy reports, at least for these 3 victims that Rex Heuermann is charged with.
So, so as soon as they started searching, right, they were looking for Shannan Gilbert, all of a sudden they're finding all these bodies. So they're not like hidden in a place where it's super difficult to find, but I guess it was just a matter of an area that's just not trafficked by people, right? It's not where you are tonight. You're at Gilgo, there's an entrance, there's a sign. This is off the beaten path. You wouldn't go there to go, you know, surfing or sunbathing, right? It's sort of almost like still kind of in the wild, and there aren't houses there. Is that the picture that you're painting for me tonight?
That's the perfect picture to paint here, Vinny, because there's sporadic, you know, housing developments here and there. You don't really see them off the highway. But 10 years ago, there was no path. You wouldn't see people on bikes. You wouldn't see people jogging. It's overgrown. It's uncomfortable. There's, you know, overgrown bushes with stickers. There's a lot of bugs in the area. You wouldn't go to these areas. So you wouldn't be searching those areas unless you had a reason to. And I think that that's where all of this comes together with the search for Shannan, you know, and that's the reason why those remains were discovered after people started to think that maybe she was there. So, and then that led people to search in other areas along this Ocean Parkway.
And now tying it back to the suspect here, if he's from the area, he would know very well, this is an area where nobody really goes, right? So it would have to be someone with some of that sort of knowledge, right? Here's an area people really don't go. This is a good place for me to deposit these bodies, these victims, because unless you're looking for them, you're not going to find them.
Exactly. You know, he grew up in the area. He lived in that Massapequa home for so long. And, you know, I do have to say, you know, there was some speculation, some reporting that I had, you know, just been following and watching. And some people were wondering whether or not his home had a line of sight to this beach area or the beach area where the victims' bodies were found. And I have to tell you no, because his home is a single-story home, as we know. It's surrounded by houses, and there is no beach view there. But it is just a short drive to where we were today.
All right. Anything else that you noticed today, Matt, that you want folks to know about? I mean, to me, it's eye-opening. It's really, really eye-opening seeing the highway, but then, like, if it's the middle of the night, it's the middle of the winter, nobody's going to be there. And nobody would have found if they weren't looking. Anything else that you came across today and you're like, oh, here we go?
Well, no, I think that that's it, right? I think the 2 big takeaways from Court TV's investigation and our visits today is how remote and unsuspecting and how difficult these locations are to get to. That's number 1. And then number 2, you know, I just can't say it enough, like this community in Long Island, everybody is impacted by this story so much, and it's really palpable, you know, when you talk to people about how much fear people had for the past 10 years of not having answers, and they're hoping to get some now.
All right, Matt Johnson, Court TV crime and justice correspondent on Gilgo Beach tonight. Thank you so much, sir. We'll speak again tomorrow. All right, we've got a lot more to get to. We're going to bring in our experts. Try to get at that question, you know, where could they have been killed? What would it take? What type of place would the killer need to do what was done here? And then wrap these bodies and put them in some sort of a truck car and get them out to Long Island. Plus, coming up next hour.
Big news tonight in Klamath Falls, Oregon. A woman trapped by a suspected sex offender inside a cinder block cell escapes. She calls 911. Police track down the man accused of locking her up, but are wondering tonight if there are other victims around the country in the multiple states where this suspect has lived.
And while the alleged perpetrator is already in federal custody, the disturbing evidence uncovered to date points to an individual's ongoing and escalating pattern of violence targeting women in multiple states throughout the country.
A man married 6 times. 4 of his wives died under mysterious circumstances.
Eccentric widower Thomas Randolph.
Charged with the murders of his wife and the man he allegedly paid to kill her.
A 2017 conviction overturned.
The plan between Mr. Miller and Mr. Randolph was to kill Sharon.
Now he faces a jury once again.
The Widower Murder Trial. Live coverage starting Monday at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
This portion had to deal with the deaths of these 4 young women, and that's what we focused on. That was what the grand jury investigation was focused on. I talked about the commonalities, and the commonalities, all of those commonalities that we talked to were unique to these 4 separate cases. So that's what we're working on. I think the other members of the task force said, you know, we're going to continue, and continue to work and investigate and try to get a small measure of closure for all the victims' families. But for right now, this defendant, it's this defendant with these 4 victims.
Welcome back. We're talking about, of course, the Long Island serial killer. I want to put a map up here. So again, just to go through this, where the remains were found, and you start with the Gilgo 4. Amber Lynn Costello, nude, wrapped in burlap. Melissa Barthelemy, nude, wrapped in burlap. Maureen Bernard Barnes, nude, wrapped in burlap. Megan Waterman, nude, wrapped in burlap. Then you move towards the east. You've got John Doe, Asian male, 17 to 38, found wearing women's clothing. Jessica Taylor, skull, hands, and right forearm, and her torso was found in Manorville in 2003. Valerie Mack, skull, hands, and right foot. Her torso also found in Manorville in 2000. Baby Doe, 16 to 32 months old, the female daughter of Peaches. Now, the Jane Doe, known as Peaches because of a peach tattoo, you can see where her remains were found west of Gilgo, of the Gilgo 4, and even further away from Baby Doe. Baby Doe, again, is Peach's daughter. Her other remains were found near Hempstead Lake in 1997. Finally now, how this whole thing began. Shannon Gilbert, you've got to go way east. East of Gilgo Beach off of Ocean Parkway near Oak Beach. And that's where her remains were found. And that's, again, how this entire investigation began. But where were the victims killed? Where were they killed? Let's talk about that. Join us tonight in Los Angeles, California. Body language expert, forensic psychiatrist, trial expert, witness, and columnist, Dr. Carol Lieberman. Also joining us, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King, who is joining us tonight. Also joining us in Atlanta, Georgia, forensic death investigator, professor of forensics at Jacksonville State University, and host of the Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan is with us. Although I don't think you're in Atlanta tonight, are you?
No, I'm in Jacksonville.
He's in Jacksonville. Okay. Got it. Everyone's here. All right. This, to me, this is a huge unanswered question. Mike King, I'll start with you. How do you, if he doesn't speak, right? If he doesn't speak, how are you going to figure out, or can you figure out, where these victims were murdered?
Well, we know a couple of things right off the bat. We know the last known location, so potentially the initial contact site. And we also know the disposal site. So somewhere in between those two places, then we can start figuring out where this may have occurred and where the actual crime scene is. I think the thing we have to consider, Vinny, is the amount of risk an offender would have to take to murder somebody and then stuff them in a bag and stuff them on the side of the road. So to do all of that out on the beach seems less likely to me. They've got to go to a place where there's some comfort. And this is where my buddy Joe Scott comes in, because I think we're going to see that there's some evidence in that home that might point back and tell us this is the location where the actual crime scene is. So we got to think about it. There's multiple crime scenes: the initial contact site, the actual place where the murders occurred, and then that disposal site where we know. And we know two pieces of the puzzle. It's now just figuring out the third.
Yeah. So, Jessica, what do you think? You know, Matt was walking us around there, and whoever did this knew that it was extremely remote. There's not a lot of traffic. What does your gut tell you about where this could have taken place? Is it possible that it could have taken place off of Ocean Beach Parkway in the middle of the night?
I think that would be highly unlikely, Vin. My first blush here is that he would have needed a significant amount of privacy, because there's a sexual component to this. You're not just talking about listen, it's horrible enough. Sure. It's a homicide, but you're not just talking about that. There is the potential for a sexual assault that's going on. So this individual would have had to have had time to spend with these victims, regardless of how that sexual assault manifests itself. And also, I find it quite interesting. You know, Matt mentioned something in the earlier report where he talked about victims being bound. And that goes to it's not necessary to bind a decedent. You can wrap them up, essentially, and deposit them. Binding implies that you're trying to inhibit their ability to struggle. And so I think that's a big part of that. And he would have to have had time to do that. Would it have been a known hotel, a no-tell motel, as they say? Could it have been a basement in a home somewhere, or an abandoned building? You never know. But I think he would have had to have had a specific location in order to facilitate this. And one last thing, I still, for the life of me, don't know specifically, and I don't know if anybody does at this point, what the ME is opining as the cause of death in any of these cases, because of the advanced decomposition. And that's troubling. That's difficult. It's a hard hill to climb.
Dr. Carol Lieberman, take us inside the criminal mind here. How much planning do you think is involved here? How much planning? Would the killer kind of do the same routine every single time?
Typically, a serial killer, especially one as sort of methodical as Heuermann, would have done the same pattern each time, which is why, you know, it makes it kind of questionable about whether he did have anything to do with the other bodies, although they're so close. You know, it almost seems like, well, yes, that makes sense. But why would he have changed his method of what he was doing with the bodies, how he killed them, where he put them, and so on? Plus, they weren't all in burlap sacks, so and some of them were dismembered. So there would have to have been something in his life that changed him, that changed the way that he did things.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Carol Lieberman. We know this suspect is a married man with children. Do you think it's possible he could have done it in his own home? That you would, would someone like this separate the two lives and not mix the murdering with the home life? Or do you think it's possible that, because we know that the family sometimes traveled, that he could somehow get them back to his home base, the place where his family lives?
Well, I think that he could do that without any, it wouldn't bother him that it was in the same place as his family is. But it was kind of strange because we heard about how his wife wasn't at home during the times that these people were supposedly killed. But it has only come out just now and sort of, I don't know that it's been totally accepted that his children weren't home at that time too. But where were they? Especially his son, who has special needs. Were they with their mother? I mean, that hasn't really come out. That hasn't been clear. So, obviously, if the children were home, he wouldn't have done it at home. One would certainly hope. But I think that certainly it's the safest place to do it in terms of not being bothered by anybody.
All right, our guests are staying with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about all the victims. So is there a connection between the Gilgo Four and one or more of the other victims, including Shannan Gilbert? That when we return.
A man married 6 times. 4 of his wives died under mysterious circumstances.
Eccentric widower Thomas Randolph,
charged with the murders of his wife and the man he allegedly paid to kill her.
A 2017 conviction overturned.
The plan between Mr. Miller and Mr. Randolph was to kill Sharon.
Now he faces a jury once again.
The Widower Murder Trial. Live coverage starting Monday at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
I think the biggest clue for me was that when the police revealed Rex's Google searches, in one of those Google searches was the word Asian twink, which was basically he had done a search for porn revolving an Asian man, an effeminate Asian man. That Google search leads me to believe that maybe he is responsible for the victim we know as Asian male, and that means he could be responsible for all 10.
That was last night's show. And think about that. There's this one John Doe who, we don't know who he is. But then you've got that Google search from the accused killer where he's looking up this, and we can put it on the screen for the folks. They can read it for themselves. Where he's that's pretty specific. That's pretty specific. And then you look at the victim who was found was an Asian male, not terribly big, and some women's clothing. So is that another connection potentially between this accused serial killer and one of the other victims, not the Gilgo Four? Something else I want you to notice is the size. There seems to be a little bit of a theme here that we're talking about very small, petite women. Melissa, 4'10", looking at the victims. You got Melissa, 4'10". You've got Maureen, 4'11". Amber, 4'11". Valerie Mack, about 5 feet. Shannan Gilbert, 5'2" to 5'4". And again, the John Doe, just 5'6". Not a big guy. So what's going on here? Then remember this interview from New York Magazine, this article, My Boss, the Monster. Mary Schell wrote this. When I first met the accused killer in his Midtown office, his face turned red like that of a shy teenage boy who'd been surprised by a hot girl in the cafeteria. Even sitting behind his desk, he looked to me like a giant. His office was mostly staffed by women like myself. 2 key words here, young and petite. The girl next door type. We knew he was married with a family in Massapequa, but he never spoke of them. Did he have a type? And does that make some sort of a connection here? Let's bring back in our guests, Dr. Carol Lieberman, Mike King, Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph Scott Morgan, what do you think about that? The type. His office is filled with these petite young women. The Gilgo Four, all young, petite women. Some of these other victims, perhaps, fitting that same mode.
Yeah, quite possibly, and not just that, but I'm thinking about from the physical type, from the perspective of how easy someone of his size could have physically manhandled someone who is physically inferior to him. It's a very asymmetrical relationship that you have between this kind of hulking guy that's alleged to have committed these crimes and these diminutive victims that you have. So yeah, I mean, and many times, you know, with these cases, you're seeing patterns in serial investigations I've been involved in. There was always a type that the perpetrator would go after. And here's another piece to this, Vin, is the deposition of the bodies. That is where they're left and how they're left specifically. And, you know, we've got kind of a big change here. I know Dr. Carroll mentioned just a moment ago kind of changing, you know, kind of changing things up a little bit, where you have these bodies, the so-called alleged Gilgo 4 that are relatively intact, but then you have these dismemberments, which is something that is not commonly seen. So I'm fascinated by that. And also one more thing that Matt had mentioned, the involvement of the forensic anthropologist, particularly as it applies to the dismemberment. Tool marks in those cases are going to play a huge role in trying to understand what exactly went on.
Mike King, your thoughts about any connection between the Gilgo 4 and any of the other victims that have been found, the other 7?
Yeah, as an investigator, Vinny, I mean, one of the things you first focus on is the victimology and why does this person become a victim. So you have to look at not only the fact that we now know there's some internet searches that talk about looking for that pubescent teenage type individual, the fact that these women are physically small and could fit into that preferential victim kind of a role, the idea that they could be easily controlled. I think what we have to consider when we see an anomaly, like if this young Asian young man is involved in this series of serial killings, is it a mistake? He thought he was getting something that he didn't get once the deal started happening. Or is it a substitute victim because his preferential victim wasn't available, and so he had to just get a stage prop, so to speak, to satisfy these perversions and these predatory feelings that the individual has? And as far as the location, you got to take into account the fact that they're all discovered in a pretty close area. And if you looked at like what Matt was showing earlier on that map, the fact that if it's possible that Heuermann left his home and went straight east and then comes south and down along that parkway, all of those are going the direction he would be traveling westbound to make a full loop to head back home. It's 29 minutes if he goes east. It's 22 if he goes south or west. So it's a pretty easy loop for the guy to make. Easy. And it puts him right where he needs to be. And I'll tell you what, in the middle of the night, I've been on that road. Even in the middle of the night, you can have stretches of time when there's not a vehicle in sight.
Mike King, Joseph Scott Morgan, Dr. Carol Liederman, we're out of time for tonight, but we'll continue this conversation. Thank you so much.